the H-bomb video on plagiarism going as background noise sometime this last week, and I caught this one line from the Illuminati section, or maybe it was from the Illuminati side video, trying to excuse her plagiarism. She had this comment about how all her scripts are a minimum of 4,000 words, so of course she needed to plagiarize to get her videos out on time. Chat, do you want to guess how many words are in this Mutt script this week? If so, pop off in chat or the comments if you're watching on the edited version on YouTube. And let's see if you can guess. I'll tell you at the end of the show. In the meantime, I'm going to do my injection before I start doing the actual show, because I'm allowed to do that. And it's just part of my normal-ass healthcare as a frickin' trans woman, and Twitch nor YouTube are allowed to say that I can't, so, I did, however, decide to pull my estrogen beforehand, just so I don't have to worry about accidentally showing my... what's it called? Script information? Not script prescription information. Get through the leg, you little mass. There we go. Weirdly, I think this is actually the first time that my injection day has lined up with Muttday morning news, which is a little silly. Or it's happened before and I've forgotten already, but hey. In case you're wondering, no, I did not script this section, so this part doesn't count. Anyway, woof! And welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Fen. Now let's get to some news. 2 weeks ago, I reported on 5 bills that would offer a modicum of protection for Californian queer and trans folks, which were merely waiting for California Governor Gavin Trump 3.0 Newsom's signature. The next week, the Trans News Network published a much more complete list of 10 bills sitting on the theoretically liberal governor's desk. Despite signing hundreds of bills into law at the end of California's legislative session back in September, the governor had not signed nor vetoed any of the queer rights bills before last week, at least until October 7th, when he made the decision on Assembly Bill 86, which would tweak state education language to acknowledge that trans and intersex people exist and are allowed to learn about their own bodies the same as any other child. He vetoed that one. A little look behind the curtain, I wrote the draft for this story on the 12th at 9 a.m. There were about 14 hours left for Newsom to sign any of the bills from the closed legislative session. Thus far, he'd signed 2 of the 10 TNN had flagged. None of the 5 trans protective bills, only AB 727, which mandates schools and universities provide queer suicide hotline information, though not fund them, a rather glaring oversight as the bill was pushed in response to the Trump administration's illegal money stripping, pulling already allocated funding from the Trevor Project hotline. And AB 678, a bill requiring state housing programs ensure inclusive and non-discriminatory practices towards queer people facing homelessness. A necessity, especially in the face of the Trump administration's efforts to ban trans folk from shelters entirely, though only a mild balm in the face of Newsom's own crusade against the homeless. For my viewers, I think this is something folks struggle. Homelessness is an evil concept, built from our systems that treat shelter from the elements as an asset to be played with on the open market. That, conceptually, should be combated. The homeless themselves are victims of those systems. But to those who profit from shelter as an asset, it's easier to treat the human beings affected by an issue as its perpetrators rather than its victims. See also how liberals treat drug addiction or other forms of addiction, and before anyone thinks they're being clever, no, porn and sex addiction are not real. They are bunk science made up by the same religious groups trying to prove that men are predisposed to animalistic domination of those around them. Do not need to help their fake science spread. Oh, the other 8 California bills? Well, I was up till 1 a.m. my time to make sure the governor didn't veto any of them. See, any bills unsigned after midnight Pacific last night still go into law. In California, the governor can only shut down bills with a direct veto. A note for folks who don't understand how much Newsom honks, not just for trans folk and California's homeless, but for everyone. Here are some of the other bills from this session he did veto. A state firefighter pay raise. California Dems are actually threatening to try for the rare legislative override of the veto and even seem to have enough votes to do so. He also blocked a bill that would require data centers disclose their water use, one that would regulate license plate readers, and 3 different bills meant to bolster California's power grid stability while reducing consumer energy costs by funding numerous consumer-level systems like rooftop solar and backup batteries. Let me throw a stupid story into the mix here just to change up the pace before it gets dumber. Last week, Destiny, the right-wing provocateur, not the game by Bungie that keeps accidentally stealing fan-made work, and a small swarm of outrage merchants decided to go after the lefty political commentator and Twitch streamer Hasan Piker. But since they don't care about critiquing his foolishness in speaking hops or any other legitimate issue, they had to invent one, and thought they hit right on the money when he used a remote while issuing a correction to his dog Kaya on stream. The Chuds obviously claimed it was a shock collar and that Piker was shocking his dog to make her stay visible on stream. Piker went on to take the collar off Kaya and show his chat that it was not a shock collar, nor even capable of delivering a shock, but a vibration collar. And since I'm in the unique position of being a twisted little dog girl, I'm in the fun position of being able to exactly explain why that's all crap. See, most electronic training collars on the market are vibration call, using a small internal motor to buzz when giving a correction. They're essentially the opposite of clicker train. With both instances, you're conditioning the recipient, dog or otherwise, with a command or correction, then you load the click with a reward, such as a treat or what have you, and the vibration with a scolding. This trains the recipient to associate the click with a positive reward for following a command, and a vibration with an undesirable action. The same can also be done with shock collars. They merely provide the negative stimuli at the same time, or positive if you're training a masochistic puppy girl. Here's my shock collar. When I'm feeling particularly bored, I have this set up to send me shocks, beeps, or vibrations at the behest of my Twitch chat. See those rubber prongs? Those are what deliver the shock. Piker's does not have them. It literally cannot deliver a shock, whether because he removed them, most shock collars have removable prongs so you can swap lengths for a better fit on your dog, or because they only make the one collar and know many of their customers only want the sound and vibration options, so the prongs are removable. They're not in this one because mine is a cheap piece of crap, but hey. I'm choosing to not name this next segment for 2 reasons. One, I hope to never see another week where so many Trump cronies are chewing on the structure of my country. And 2, I haven't thought of a clever dog joke that works with cronyism. See, it's been a barn burner of a week for the ever upward failing assholes what surround the USian dictator like only barely metaphorical vultures. First up, there's the well-worn by this point story of Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and human rights nightmare and literal monarchy, Saudi Arabia, buying Electronic Arts for $55 billion. What you might not have heard is why that price is so absurd that Kushner's involvement is kind of essential to getting it past regulatory agencies. See, on Thursday, September 25th, before the rumors about an EA buyout started circulating on the 26th, and well before the official announcement on Monday the 29th, EA's share price was $168 a share with 210,000 shares in circulation. At market open on the 29th, EA was trading at $200 a share. That is more than a $30 increase over the course of 4 days. Even before the buyout and plans to take the company private were official, but the math was there for any to see. A theoretically $50 billion buyout from the Saudi royal family would mean taking the company private, which also meant buying out shareholders. Investors could just do the math, seeing how a $50 billion buyout would translate to the share price for its 210,000 shares. This mutt will also point out that's likely why the actual offer of $5 billion was a bit higher than the originally expected $50 billion. In the fervor, EA's total stock value hit its all-time high of $49.88 billion. Investors had, in essence, raised the EA stock price on the open market to nearly what Kushner and the Saudi royal family were going to pay for each share. So when it came time to announce the deal, they had to offer a bit more per share. That's why it's now $210 per share. If you're curious, yes, EA is still trading at about $201 to $202 a share. What you also might not know is that while $30 billion of that $55 billion is coming from the Saudi Arabians and Kushner, he's also spending Saudi blood money, to be clear, $20 billion is coming from a loan EA is taking out against itself from JP Morgan Chase, famous debankers of sex workers and makers of queer and adult fiction. Remember to go to stoppaypros.neocities.org to learn how easy it is to fight back against banks, credit cards, and payment processors who want to tell you what you can and cannot do with your money. Oh, right, and EA has already promised its new overlords that in order to pay off that $20 billion loan it's taking against itself so they can buy it, they'll be using Gen AI to cut at least 20% of their costs, aka their employees. So yeah, this one is only getting through any regulatory agency because their regulations are either a joke or because one of the buyers is the favorite son-in-law of the US dictator. Speaking of the US dictator's sons, his youngest son, Barron, has been tapped for a leadership role in the new Trump-controlled TikTok. This might sound strange if you weren't following the shenanigans behind the scenes of the Trump 2024 campaign and only remember the preteen or teenage Barron from the first Trump administration. So let me give you a quick update. Well, he's 19 and looks like this now. Yeah, I'm not going to say who his hairstyle choice reminds me of, but it's not Charlie Chaplin. He's also, according to Donald himself, responsible for the GOP's election victory, rather than the reality where he ran as a hard-right candidate against a senile right-winger who thought he was a liberal, then a centrist woman who decided to walk in lockstep behind that senile dude, but sure. What Trump meant by that was Barron was the one who connected Donald directly with right-wing internet pundits on Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. Yeah, he was the one who got Trump to go on Joe Rogan, connected him with Aiden Ross, all of those delightful monsters. Barron was the one who got the Trump campaign on board with memifying their hatred, tapping him to spearhead TikTok's new vile direction as an Oracle subsidiary is just the next logical step. If you're steeped in cronyism, nepotism, and instigating human suffering for clicks at least, you know who's also going to be having trouble with TikTok? Bari Weiss, the pick-me lesbian who just wrote a $150 million golden parachute into a job she is neither qualified for nor any reasonable person would ever want. I'll say the quiet part out loud. Broadcast news is dying. I don't know why anyone would want to become the editor-in-chief of the CBS newsroom, much less a frankly conservative commentator. Most people are either hiding from the news or getting it from local sources and independent folks on YouTube, TikTok, Substackers, Twitch. What you're doing right now from me. We have the statistics. We know broadcast news has generally failed to draw in younger viewers and has been subsisting on the baby boomers. And you know what baby boomers watch CBS News? The ones who can't stand Fox News and are more likely than not already registered for a No Kings protest next week. Reminder for my viewers, don't register for a damn protest. What I mean is, Weiss has no experience reporting real news. Her only experience was running the Free Press, the company Paramount bought her out of, which, look, some of its most famous stories were making up bold-faced lies about George Floyd, along with many, many other instances. In fact, there's a hilarious article on The Verge by Elizabeth Lopato, I'll link in the description, that goes over Weiss's long history of journalistic malpractice. I recommend it if you'd like to get a Cassandritic vision of CBS's news future. Oh right, the TikTok joke at the beginning of this story. Short version, TikTok's new Trump-approved owner, Oracle, is a tech company owned by billionaire Larry Ellison, whose son, David Ellison, is the CEO of Paramount Skydance. And in an utterly, I suppose novel is technically correct, arrangement, Bari Weiss's direct supervisor as editor-in-chief of CBS News. For context, the CBS News president, Tom Chabrowski, doesn't even report directly to Ellison. Let's move away from media cronies for a second and focus on Russell Vaughn, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, acting administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Protection Bureau, former vice president of the right-wing hate group The Heritage Foundation's lobbying arm, Heritage Action, founder of the Center for Renewing America, another right-wing hate group with a particular bee in its bonnet over critical race theory, and one of the major contributors to Project 2025. Late on October 3rd, the OBM quietly removed a line from their FAQ for federal employees furloughed by the government shutdown. Namely, that per the Government Employees Fair Treatment Act of 2019, employees furloughed as part of any lapse in appropriations that begin on or after December 22nd, 2018 are in fact owed all back pay for all work done on furlough. The law was written and signed by Trump in 2019 during the longest federal shutdown in US history, at least so far. But now that it's become inconvenient, especially as the Republican-controlled trifecta of House, Senate, and presidency have failed to pin the shutdown on Dems and continue to hide from their sword of Damocles, the still not yet sworn-in Arizona representative, Adelita Grijalva, Vaughn has sought to hide that law. And that's in addition to the illegal federal layoffs on Friday, many targeting key CDC measles teams as the disease surges in record numbers across the country, in no small part directly because of the Health and Human Services Secretary, Brainworm Bobby Jr. Of course, it's already been announced, oops, many of those firings were in error, we'll bring them right back, but also we don't have to pay for furloughed work unless we want to. Does that feel familiar to you? If so, that's probably because it's the exact same crap Vaughn's OBM pulled back in April when it illegally laid off swaths of civil servants, claimed, oops, some of those were in error, and totally were undone. The firings were then, and are still, now more so because of the shutdown, illegal to begin with, but many were not actually undone or rehired, and for many who were rehired or whose job termination just never really processed, they returned to the office to discover that they instead were merely being laid off in June a little bit more legally. Remember how I said Vaughn was one of the major contributors to Project 2025, the anti-science, anti-healthcare, anti-human rights layout the 2025 Trump administration has been following step by step since day one while pretending to distance themselves from during the election? I wonder if gutting federal departments based on science and human health, like the CDC, might have been part of Project 2025. Follow-up. Can any of you tell whether I'm being serious or sarcastic? These next three stories, well, they're actually almost the same story as they're all the same flavor of incompetence and lack of infosec replicated across the Trump 2.0 cabinet, and they all happened on the same day. Last week, on Wednesday the 8th, Scott Bessent, the millionaire Secretary of the Treasury, had the U.S. bail out Argentina to the tune of $20 million. And since none of these loons communicate like professionals or even understand the concept of infosec, after Bessent checked his phone in a public hearing, Angelina Katanis from AP News caught a photo of the secretary reading a message that seemed to be from Brooke Rollins, the agricultural secretary, which read, "Finally, just a heads up, I'm getting more intel, but this is highly unfortunate. We bailed out Argentina yesterday, and in return, the Argentines, it's written weirdly, sorry, are removing their export tariffs on grains, reducing their price, and sold a bunch of soybeans to China at a time when we would normally be selling to China. Soy prices are dropping further because of it. This gives China more leverage on us." Yeah, normally we sell nearly $13 billion in soybeans to China every year. But with Donald's trade war with, well, everyone, they're sitting unsold as Xi threatens to withhold rare earth metals necessary to keep the generative AI bubble going, as it continues to be the only element propping up the otherwise death-spiraling US economy. It's also the cause of the death spiral, but that's neither here nor there. Also on the 8th, Trump held what I can only describe as an informal chat with a bunch of right-wing influencers dressed up to look like a conference on what to do about anti-fascists. Actually, quick aside, y'all get that's why they use the shorthand Antifa, right? Sorry, tangent, I know, but it's really telling when a dictator starts labeling anti-fascism a sign one is a terrorist. Doubly so when they'd use a cute nickname to obfuscate that they're opposed to anti-fascists. Exponentially more so when speakers at this very chat condemned the anti-fascists of Weimar Germany, who resisted the Nazis. Anyway, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, slunk into the event before saying he had news for Trump and that it would have to wait until the media left before passing a note to the dictator, which was naturally caught by the AP News photographer Evan Vucci. It read, "You need to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first." Trump announced to the room he was needed elsewhere for the Middle East peace deal, the one where Israel still steals all of Palestine's fertile farmland after burning down many of the olive groves generations of Palestinians cultivated there, and where the Israeli military continues to bomb civilians while under a ceasefire, and as Hamas began returning hostages about 20 minutes ago at time of writing and about 9 hours ago at time of recording. He then proceeded to languish in the Blue Room, continuing to chat with the influencers, mostly a third the dictator's age, as Rubio grew visibly more anxious, which probably would have been funny were it fiction, but when it's the US president and a peace deal to maybe stop a genocide, I personally wouldn't mind some amount of alacrity. Not to be outdone, also on October 8th, Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, when called before the Senate Judiciary Committee to discuss the administration's sudden refusal to reveal the contents of the Epstein files, inadvertently revealed that instead of notes on the case or any other documentation one would expect an attorney general to have prepared for such an inquiry, she'd brought a burn book, pages and pages of social media posts made by, as well as typed and handwritten notes about, the committee members. As much as I love petty drama, for the record, that wasn't a sarcastic joke, I don't terribly care to run down all, or really any, of the comments Jonathan Erst caught astonishingly clear photos of when the real issue at hand is the precedent this sets. The Attorney General of the United States decided she does not answer to Congress to such a degree she not only didn't prepare to answer their questions, but instead wrote tailored insults and distractions for the committee members. Speaking of my love of petty drama, Alex Jones, the right-wing conspiracy theorist what runs InfoWars, owes a lot of money and is trying to make it someone else's problem again. Specifically, he owes $1.4 billion to the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting, who he repeatedly claimed to his inexplicably large audience were paid actors and that it was a fake shooting. Yeah, he was destroyed in a defamation case, which is why he owes them $1.4 billion. He's been trying to get that judgment overturned for years and even pulled some wild shell company shenanigans back in 2022 to sneakily and illegally, against the terms of his own lawsuit with the Sandy Hook families, buy out InfoWars from himself to avoid paying his legal fees and to keep The Onion, who have the enthusiastic blessing of the Sandy Hook families, from buying the conspiracy and soy pill peddling grift mill. Well, he's at it again. He submitted an appeal last month to the Supreme Court, who were already planning a closed-door discussion of the case on Friday, but on Thursday, Jones asked for an emergency appeal in an attempt to halt judgment before his site is put up for auction again. Jones's lawyers described the situation rather comically as, it would be as if the KKK levied on a judgment against the NAACP, or a group of atheists took over a church or synagogue, ideologically polar opposites, and began to use the opposition entity for its own ideological purposes. Which, yeah, dude, that's why it's funny, you know? Except for the part where InfoWars is the Rolex-powered, ineffectual, sickly little cousin to the KKK in this metaphor, but sure. I wish you the best with the consequences of your own actions. Oh, it's finally the last crony of the week, except there are two of them in this story, damn it. Do you remember Robbie Starbuck? Honestly, I don't blame you. I only recall he exists because my basic white girl tail starts wagging for pumpkin spice lattes, but I'm still boycotting Starbucks, mostly out of habit at this point, and I fight off the cravings by remembering that there are two deeply weird dudes named Starbuck, though I'd rather this one was fictitious too. He's the music video director turned right-wing provocateur with a particularly vitriolic, anti-queer, and especially transphobic streak, who sued Meta AI back in 2024 for defamation when its Azathoth ex machina claimed Starbuck was a January 6th 6 insurrectionists. His case was taken up by Dillian Law Group, whose founder, Harmeet Dillian, was named as Trump's pick for the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights back in February. That itself is laughable, since from 2021 to 2022, Dillian was the CEO of the Center for American Liberty, another right-wing hate group, specifically a lawfare org, which during her tenure supported right-wing grifters, AstroTurf detransitioner cases, and the lawsuits of parents seeking to harm and control their trans children, all while directly paying Dillian's own DLG $1.3 million during that same time. She was confirmed in early April. Meta settled their case with Starbucks in late April. The exact terms of the settlement are unknown, save for one. Starbucks was appointed as a bias advisor to Meta AI. What his actual role is, or even whether Meta is paying him or was obliged to pay him for the lawsuit, are not known. Well, he's back in the news again, mostly because he seemingly can't not spout lies every time a right-wing cis dude picks up a gun to solve his problems. If you guess that he screams on Twitter about every shooter being a lefty trans monster, you win! I'm sorry to say, the prize is pattern recognition. I do not recommend it. When asked by The Guardian how those bigoted opinions, which seem to be bursting from him with more frequency since the Kirk shooting, aligned with his perspective as the bias advisor for Meta AI, they said it much more politely. He apparently sent them an incredibly long and poorly written email, given what and how much of it they quoted during their story. But I think this one is one of the better examples because it's just not really how people speak. You should be honest with Guardian readers about the fact that you've been accused of extremely close ties with Antifa. Like, editorially, dude, you can say that in a way less awkward way. Reality-wise, The Guardian is single-handedly responsible for the huge uptick in anti-trans and anti-queer stories in the UK and the US since 2018. They are, in fact, as far as a journalistic outfit can get from anti-fascist without fully becoming states media or hagiographers, Fox News. Okay, this is where I wanted to include my stories on Chicago, but, well, my outline for this script had one, this should be front page national news story every single day of the last week in Chicago. Some of them had two. So I think there's just gonna have to be another video this week. Sorry, not sorry. Hopefully I'll have that up in the next day or two, but between my dog apparently picking up some kind of autoimmune thing 2 weeks ago and my cat getting a urinary blockage 2 weeks before that, my life has been kind of hectic. Reminder that this stream and the video, if you're watching the edited version, is brought to you by viewers like you, directly supporting me over on patreon.com/Fen and or coffee.com/Fen. That's Fen, P-H-E-N-N. But I don't want to leave you without some hope, so let me throw these two stories out there. First, last week, the Trump administration started floating the idea of selling student loan debt. On its face, that might sound scary, but medical and student loan debt are in this weird spot where they rarely sell for all that much in comparison to the actual amount of debt they represent. So millions in student loan or medical debt can often be bought for significantly less than trashed or forgiven by the new owner, releasing the debtors from the burden permanently, and numerous orgs have stepped up in the face of the offer to gladly buy up and forgive any debt the US government is willing to sell, since the Supreme Court under Biden blocked the president from merely forgiving the debt outright. Remember that they did that. Also, in a weird, silly side of the news, actually no, this story is pretty cool. I just have a silly personal connection with it. Last week, my state of Colorado became the first to cap the price of a drug, namely Enbrel, a medicine for treating rheumatoid arthritis, as well as a couple of other autoimmune diseases. The cap has been in the works for nearly 4 years now, already defeated one legal challenge, and is now set to go into effect on January 1st, 2027. The silly part of this story is a personal anecdote. I was not always the smoking hot chimeric trans girl trying to make the news funny and approachable. I used to be a Southern Californian egg, and a child actor. One of the only acting gigs where my father and I both got hired was a commercial for Enbrel back in the 90s, though at the time it was marketed towards sufferers of eczema. If you remember an Enbrel commercial with a dude, a kid, and a German Shepherd on a beach, yeah, that was my dad, me, and one of our dogs, Zoe. This script, by the way, now that we've hit the end, topped out at 4,400 words with a small margin of error for places where I wrote numbers as numbers and used dollar signs instead of writing out the full word. Last week's was over 5,000. It's not that hard to not plagiarize. I wasn't kidding about the fact I probably will have to do another news story this week because there's just so much. I just probably won't record it live on stream. I might just script it on its own and record it, but we'll see. I like streaming these as part of the issue. It's just that doing the visuals and it ends up with like a weirder product because of that. Let me really quickly throw the schedule for this week up. Hey, if you are in the Discord, you have, 11 more. No, you have until, so it's 9:18 right now. You have until 5:20-ish, I believe, to vote on movie night. So the options for this week are The Graduate, Princess Bride, and Harold and Maude. The theme for this week is that all of them are soundtracks done by either a single band or a single person. Technically, The Princess Bride is done by a single person, but he's also the person who was the guitarist, lead singer, and songwriter for the Dire Straits. So I'm counting it. Also, it's The Princess Bride. If you're not familiar with any of these movies, frankly, Harold and Maude, I'm going to make you all watch as the second movie if it doesn't win. The Graduate is one of what I would argue is actually a very good movie as an intro for film study, because it's not great for necessarily introducing you to like broad scope film theory, but more just to recognize the language that film uses to communicate things. Look, if you're in the Discord, if you're not, you can do !Discord and the bot will provide you a link to join. Or if you're watching on YouTube, it's down in the description and you are more than welcome to, please. But yes, thank you, hon. Graduate's really good for that. Harold and Maude is actually kind of a fascinating one because its director, Hal Ashby, originally, he only made the film because in film school, he gained access to a crane rig for a camera that he otherwise probably wouldn't have had access to, and used it to film the opening shot of what would eventually go on to be, I'm describing this weirdly. So he was working on a thing in film school and got access to this like camera crane and shot one specific thing and got so enamored with it, he essentially, according to him, came up with an entire movie later based around that unique shot that he got, and it's fascinating. And the movie itself is a little strange just because it is, among other things, a romance between he's somewhere between 18 and 20-year-old and a 60, 70-year-old woman, and yet it's, I would argue, probably one of the most like feminist and queer flavored movies that I've personally seen, especially with like a straight relationship at its core. I would also argue that it has polyamory, at least at its heart, if not necessarily at its intent. There's a specific line in the movie that brings this into particular clarity, I'll say. Namely, I'm not going to explain the context because there would be a spoiler, but there's a point where Harold finally tells Maude that he loves her, and her response is, "That's great. Now go out and love some more." When you see that in context, it makes a lot, I think you'll understand why I think that the movie has polyamory conceptually, if not necessarily intentionally at its core. Anyway, I will not be streaming Tuesday because I just don't stream Tuesdays because, one, that's when Steam goes down for maintenance, and it's just kind of a bad idea. Two, it's the day that I convert these into the myriad shorts that I put up on YouTube, so it's a whole thing. On Wednesday, I'm going to be doing PvE Tarkov at 5 p.m. That's a question mark, mostly because I'm taking Jules to a thing, and I will probably start whenever I get home, but should be started by 5. I'm enjoying playing PvE Tarkov, so I'd like to actually get some of my stuff back from insurance. On Thursday, the 16th, I'll be doing more Digimon Time Stranger. I finally corrected it. It doesn't say Time Survivor anymore. At 1 p.m., I have no no streams planned for Friday, largely because I'm trying to get back into not overworking myself, but, you know, I need to make money. We'll see. And then the regular PvE Tarkov stream with April on Saturday night, and more Digimon Time Stranger on Sunday. One day I will finish that game. I hope. Maybe. Please. I should also probably try and do some more morning streams because it feels like folks are up for those, but it seems kind of hit or miss. But yeah. That is this week's coming schedule. That's fairly accurate. Yeah, fairly accurate. I literally just wrote this. It's totally accurate. What am I saying? Anyway, thank you all so very much. I hope you enjoyed, or at least gained something from this. I don't even know how to describe the experience that watching a comedy news show covering fascism and cronyism and all of this gets you, but congratulations on being more informed, and I hope not psychically damaged. Reminder that this stream, as well as everything I do, is again brought to you by viewers like you. So thank you very much to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, and Yalk. I literally could not do this without your support over on patreon.com/Fen and or coffee.com/Fen. You can also find all of my work over at fen.gay. Again, that is PHENN.gay. Yes, that is a real URL slug. I love it. Or over at twitch.tv/fenoflore, or on Blue Sky at fen.gay. Yeah. Thank you all so very much. I really enjoy doing this, and I'm glad that folks seem to enjoy that I do it. Yeah. Bye.